Service advisors are salespeople. Their job is to sell. Their job is not to take orders. So if you increase your hours per RO, which is a measurement of sales, you will grow your gross profit.
Tonight, my guest is Pete Fisher. And some of you are going to ask, who is that? Well, we're going to get into that because he is somebody different than I've had on the show before. I've had technicians, I've had vendors, I've had leaders, I've had service managers, service advisors, I've had people in different industries, but I've not had someone who's been in a position at a high level to oversee much of our business, not just a little bit of the business, not service, not just variable, but all of it from a financial point of view. He's a CFO of an auto group, which means we have some serious tactical finance at our fingertips, and more importantly, maybe our eyeballs and our ears. So ladies and gentlemen, we have a gentleman who has been taught, who goes through on a day-to-day basis the finances of a large business in dealerships, who looks at the finances of service and sales and makes decisions for the business. Today, you guys get a little bit of a story, a backstory, a little bit of how-tos here, there, and what have you from Pete to understand the business a little bit better. Today, he's going to help translate the numbers into something tactical that we can use tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Pete Fisher on the Wrench Turners podcast.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate that. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me on the show as well. Look forward to the conversation.
You are most welcome, sir. And thank you very much for giving us the time today and this evening. And I'm looking forward to this wholeheartedly because there's so many tactical things that we in the service department we don't know, either from an ignorant standpoint or a pure education standpoint. We don't have the background. So let's go to the background. Let's go to the very beginning to where you started. What got you into the industry in the first place?
Yeah, crazy enough, I was in college and I went to my dad before the summer and I asked him if he could help me to get a job. I needed a summer job. So he was a bank president at the time in Houston, and he got me a job writing service at Charlie Thomas Ford in Houston, Texas. That dealership is no longer around. They've been bought by AutoNation since, but big dealer back in the day. And I started writing service for them, and I was going to college. So I worked for them winter breaks and summer. And one day I went to them and I said, hey, writing service is fine, but I'm a finance accounting major. Is there anything that would be more relatable to the degree I'm trying to pursue? And they said, yeah, absolutely. We have an accounting office. Why don't you go work in the accounting office? So I went and started working in the accounting office, and I developed some relationships and met some people. One of them was the CFO of the group. We kind of struck up a relationship and a friendship, and after I graduated from college, I reached out to him for job opportunities, and he jumped on it and said, come work for me, be a staff accountant at a car dealership in Houston, Texas. And that's where I started.
Awesome. Now, would you say, so it sounds like more than anything, let me back that truck up a little bit. It sounds more like you needed a job.
Yeah.
And you needed a job. So there's been a fair few people on the show that have gone, I needed a job. That's why I got in the industry. And as we all know, once you're in it, you're kind of in it forever.
You're kind of in it.
So that's interesting. So you finance an accounting major, and now you've started. What was that first year like? So you got into the business, and somebody say, hey, come work with me in the accounting department. What was the first real year in the accounting department like? Is it what I'm going to suggest? There's lots of people in the comments or watching that are going to say it's boring. Is it really boring in there?
No. It's not boring. It's crazy, actually. It was crazy. It was, they threw me into some position. They were like, okay, we need you to be a cashier. And I was like, all right, I don't know what that is, but sure, I'll jump in and be a cashier. So you take in the deals, you count the cash that comes in with the deals, and then you push the deal to the next desk, which is, the biller. And so I'm, okay, I'll figure that out. Sure, we can make that work. Well, funny enough, I think my first week on the job, some salesman brought me a deal, and the cash down payment was supposed to be attached to the deal when they brought the deal to me. Well, he brought me the deal. It said it had $5,000 cash down payment, but there was no cash. So instantly I was like, hey, this is missing $5,000 cash down payment. So I went to my manager and she was like, oh, it's missing whatever. The salesman at that point claimed that I took the $5,000 cash and pocketed the $5,000 cash. There was a whole investigation around it. Brought in the HR expert. They brought in all these people, so they did quiz me down on that, and that was kind of my intro to the accounting department, which was a little insane, right? Nothing you've ever really experienced before. You've never been accused of stealing $5,000 in cash, something you're not really
First week on the
prepared
job
to deal
too.
with. Right, exactly. So it was a little crazy. And then all of a sudden it was closeout, what they called closeout. So my job was fine. I was working deals as they came in. And then all of a sudden I had, 100 deals in front of me. You just deal with all these 100 deals all at the same time. It's like 4 o'clock, right? They drop 100 deals on me. Well, I'm there till 9, 10, 11 o'clock, whatever it takes to process all those and go through all those. So yeah, it was a lot. It was,
So
it
you're
was
talking
definitely,
you're talking about closeout. Are you basically talking about month end for sales kind of deal?
yeah, month end. Exactly.
Okay. So interesting. Very interesting because we're having this conversation in Service Drive live group chat right now, and I think it's probably going to be past now because this is going to be recording. We're recording today. The conversation is going to be happening in a couple of days, but because the release is definitely delayed, it's already happened. So sorry if you missed the conversation, but we're talking about month end and how to help service managers, fixed directors, and service directors not be going mental about the end of the month closeout. So you're talking about the same thing in sales as we talking about in service. It's like we got all of these work in pros, all of those WIP, and all of the customers in the last couple of days and the last couple of days of the month. We got warranty jobs that are still potentially pending. We've got internal jobs, PDIs or accessories that go on the car to get the car out and get the car sold. And da, 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 da. You got the same thing to do the same on sales side. You got deals that we gotta get the deals closed and out. And it's crazy. You're talking about staying till 10, 11 o'clock at night to try and get all these deals, the paperwork dealt with. Is there something that maybe, again, this is going to be a bit delayed or back and forth, but in terms of closeout, because you've been doing it a while now, you're well over 20 years in this business and dealing with closeout every month ever since. Is there something that you do to mentally prepare yourself for what is potentially an inevitable thing about the end of the month? You can live every day like it's the end of the month and get as much closed every day as you possibly can, but inevitably there's going to be a rush at the end of the month. Is there something mentally that you do to prepare for that?
So I think more than anything, it's being prepared by making sure that you stay up with them, making sure that you're chasing deals that are happening during the month so that you don't have that massive flux at the end. You can prevent some of that with constant maintenance throughout the month, like making sure the open RO list is checked on a daily basis, going around and seeing what's going on with this RO. Why isn't it closed? Same thing with deals. Where is this deal? Why is this deal not up in the office yet? Trying to get ahead of it so that the month end is just another day versus the way it was when I first got into the business. When I first got into the business, I mean, our month end closes were insane. We stayed all night, actually, billing car deals. I mean, the whole office would stay all night, 24 hours. We'd come to work we'd go home, we'd take a shower, we'd come back to work. So you'd be home for 30 minutes and you come back to work and do it again for another day. That kind of stuff. You can't really ask people to do that anymore because people don't work like that anymore. Back, I guess that was 20, 26 years ago. People were okay with that because we just did what we had to do. Nobody complained because you knew if you complained, you got fired. Nowadays, if you complain, you get what do? They cater to you basically, right? So it's a different world than it used to be. But like I said, if you prepare for the month every day and you're ahead and you're trying to get ahead of the work that's coming, you can avoid that mad rush at month end and you can make it more seamless where it's just another day.
Interesting. Is there something super tactical? Let's say either a program that you use or something even more specific, like do you journal? Do you write things down to keep track of those kinds of things outside of what is normal, whether it's outside the DMS? Is there something that you do very specifically to help you with that? Or is
So,
is it simply
so
part of the
we,
DMS?
we use a reporting tool called Reverse Risk pretty heavily. It's actually Reynolds and Reynolds owns the tool. It's a reporting tool and it shows you your open ROs. It shows your pending deals, shows your book deals. It shows you what's been turned in, what's not been turned in. So you can use that tool very effectively to make sure that you're staying on top of your open ROs, staying on top of your open deals, staying on top of everything that's pending to make your life much, much easier. I mean, it's a great tool. There's a couple tools out there, but that's one that I've used for a long time and has been consistently a great tool for us to use.
Awesome. Is that something, because it does have a sales component to it, is that something that the service manager or fixed director would have access to
Yeah,
be able to
absolutely.
see that? Okay.
Absolutely. They have the same level of access, so they can go in there and they can see all their open ROs and they can see that. I mean, it dives down and it shows you, your whole RO list, and it shows you what's been discounted, what hasn't been discounted, things of that nature. So it's a great tool. It's a good tool that sits
When
outside the DMS.
when you're looking through those, are you specifically looking for things that are discounted? Is that a flag for you to look for risk, or is that just
It
another
absolutely is
day?
for it absolutely is for patterns. You're looking for patterns. If a certain service advisor has a lot of tickets that have been discounted, something's going on there, right? Somebody needs to
Mm.
investigate that, dive into that, figure out what's going on there.
Yeah, one of the challenges I had to be taught out of this, as it were. One of my service managers taught me out of this after the first manager basically taught me into it, is do everything you possibly can not to discount as a service advisor. And I would suggest it's probably the same thing as a salesperson. When you're talking about sales, both of them are salespeople, right? Service advisors, sales, variable sales, it's the same thing. They're just selling something different in the dealership. And at the end of the time, you're selling an experience, right? You're trying to sell the store, sell yourself, sell the experience. And if you have to discount, the adage is if you have to sell a discount, you haven't sold the value of whatever it is you're doing well enough. Now I understand that. I agree with that. The challenge is at some point there's a line where money matters and the discount might matter more than the value. And I would love to talk to some folks out there that are very sales adept in the service drive. Like we're talking like 50% closers in the service drive, people who teach in the service drive and have 50% closers in the service drive. And how do they manage around customers dealing or asking for discounts on a regular basis? So you don't end up with a service advisor who is constantly discounting. I'm glad you brought that up, because that hopefully that'll jog my memory and somebody out there watching will go, oh, that's me. I need to be on the show. And so if you're looking for patterns in finance and you're looking for patterns both in sales and in service, and you've got a tool, and there's multiple tools, but you've got a tool that helps you find the patterns, find the risk, find the open stuff, so at the end of the month isn't so crazy. That's awesome. So that's something you've built and or dealt with over the past little bit. Talk to me about the stuff in the between. So we know that you were accounting and finance manager. You started in the accounting office. You had a very rough first week, and now you're into, let's say, the middle part of your career. You've been in the business for 5 to 15 years, somewhere in there. Talk to me, what's like the average day of somebody who is, say, not the CFO of a group, but somebody who is operations or lead accounting in a dealership. And if you can break that down a little bit to explain that to a service manager who has no idea really what they do in a day.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of it is process, right? I mean, you've got an accounting office that, you've got a bunch of accounting clerks that are in the office, and those accounting clerks have specific jobs they're doing on a day-by-day basis. So whether it's a biller, whether it's somebody that's processing AP or somebody that's working on AR, those people have specific duties that they're tasked with on a daily basis. As an office manager or controller, you are going in there and making sure that your staff is accomplishing all their tasks that they need to accomplish on a daily basis. But you're also hunting down things inside the dealership as well, outside of your accounting department, where you're working with the service manager and you're saying, okay, I've got I've got a bunch of credit card, transactions that occurred that I don't have receipts for. Where are the receipts? What happened? What are these payments for? Or you get a bunch of checks in AR that nobody knows where to code because they're, to do with service or they're to do with parts. And you go talk to the parts manager, you go talk to the service manager and say, I need help on the identifying what these checks are actually for. So there's a lot of functions that happen within the accounting office that require collaboration with all the outside departments on a consistent basis, you
Okay.
know? And, not only processing of just daily transactions, but you also have to adhere to, there's taxes that have to be paid. There's vehicles that have to be registered. There's payroll that has to be paid. There's payroll taxes that have to be paid. There's benefits that we're dealing with as well when it comes to health insurance and things of that nature. So, I mean, there's a lot going on in the accounting office on a typical day by day basis.
What's something that in the last 10 years, so not, several different places that you've worked in, let's say, the last 10 or 15 years, what's something that is extremely common that a service manager has been deficit in, shall we say, all of that last 10 or 15 years? So every single service manager or many of the service managers have been in deficit in that you have helped coach them to improve upon. Like, is there one thing that every service manager out there is like, okay, as soon as they get in the chair, the first time in the chair, this is a thing that they struggle every time that specifically deals with the accounting department?
So, funny enough, most service managers struggle with payroll, right? They struggle with calculating pay and getting payroll timely. That's always a consistent struggle. Calculate because they have to go in there and they have to approve technician pay. They have to approve service advisor pay. They have to approve those things. They have to approve PTO and vacation and things of that nature. So timely getting them to do that is always a challenge. They're busy. I get it. They have a million other things to do, but if they want to get their people paid timely, that's something they have to adhere to, right? So that's a consistent struggle, I would say, in that seat. Other than that, it's really, I mean, it's all over the board, really. There's no consistent, like, okay, what do they really struggle with in terms of accounting? Most of it has to do with payroll and getting the payroll and the items that are needed for payroll timely back up to the office. That's
Okay.
real.
With that said, is there something that you can suggest, either a piece of advice or a piece of learning that they can do outside of basic time management that would help them be more timely with their next set of payroll?
I mean, getting ahead of it, right? They always wait until it's the last minute to do that kind of stuff, but getting ahead of it, staying on top of it on a consistent basis rather than waiting for the deadline, I think is really the key. And like you said, that's basic time management. I mean, that's pretty much anything. If you stay on top of something and you stay with it consistently, you're going to be fine. It's not going to be a big deal. But if you don't and you procrastinate, you don't touch it, you don't look at it till it's finally the deadline, then obviously it's going to be a struggle to get it done. So that's just human nature, I think.
Interesting. So it doesn't matter what position we hold, whether it's technician moving into service manager or a service advisor moving into service management. Time management is still a struggle when we're looking from a corporate structure, or even a single rooftop. We'll probably still struggle with this. Is that time management is still a problem, and one of the challenges that we have, whether it's a technician or a service advisor moving into that role, it doesn't matter. Time management is something that we need to learn, but it's very difficult to learn in any way other than on the job. The challenge then becomes like, how do I learn time management? How do I learn this figment of my imagination thing that is so important to the rest of the business? Because, like you said, service managers are busy. Typically, they have thousands of things to do. They have to deal with salespeople coming back. They have to deal with technicians not calling in sick. They have to deal with service advisors not calling customers back. They have to deal with crisis customers. They have to deal with parts not getting the things they need. They have all of these crises and everything's on fire all of the time. It seems to be for most service managers. So coming up with a way and a strategy to manage your time effectively, irrespective of what you're dealing with, especially to do with payroll, because I would imagine, I know me included as a technician, if I wasn't going to get paid on time on Friday, that was a big problem. And if I'm not going to get paid on time, I'm willing to bet everybody else in the shop isn't going to get paid on time. So you're going to have an entire kindergarten basket full of people going, "Where's my paycheck?" So
Yeah.
time
I mean,
management.
it's huge. It's like most things. I mean, we have a list of things that we have to get done on a monthly basis, right? We have a list of things that we hate doing, right? That we have to do. And we have a list of things that we like doing that we have to do. The things that we hate doing are the things that we put off and we procrastinate. Just human nature. But if we actually force ourselves to do the things that we hate doing first, it really makes the world of difference. I mean, my wife's grandmother used to call it doing your white shirts first, right?
I
You've
like that analogy.
probably heard that, right? Like
Yep.
ironing your white shirts first because they're the worst to deal with. They're the hardest. So do the worst, hardest things that you hate the most first, and then tackle the other things that you actually enjoy. And your life will be easier and your time management will go better for you as well.
Interesting. I've heard it in a slightly different way, but I still like the analogy of do the whites first. To play on that next step to try and take this both a positive and a negative way all at the same time is we tend to hate the things we suck at. So if it's difficult to do payroll, you probably suck at it and you probably know you suck at it. And whether that's from a time management issue or whether you don't understand the DMS well enough to do it easily and successfully and efficiently, one of those things more than likely you suck at it. So you need to improve so you don't suck at it, which means you may not hate it anymore, which means you might do it first or set a priority to it. The flip side of that is outside of learning is as Pete mentioned, doing a little bit as often as you can before. Not necessarily in large chunks, because this is one of the things, again, being a dad has taught me so many things. I've learned so much simply because I'm trying to teach my son how to do things. He doesn't do well doing anything he doesn't want to do. Period. End of chat. Give him an hour to do something, and at 58 minutes, he will be rushing to try and get it done. And as Murphy Law states, you will fill the time that you have. So give yourself 10 minutes a day, every day, or give yourself 15 minutes a day, every day to do the thing you don't want to do. If you have to do that 10 times a day for 10 different things, do that. But it means more than likely when it comes to end of the month to close out, you're likely going to have it done on time. It means you're going to have less problems with technicians, less problem with advisors, less problem with the accounting department saying, hey, where's the stuff? Did you fill out the stuff? Did you do the things on your door, which adds a whole bunch of stress and pressure that we don't need. So
Yeah,
interesting. So through your
you hit the
career,
nail on the head, actually.
that awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
So through your career, you've got a host of things in there. Is there some things that in there that you've learned along the way that your degree didn't teach you that you would say is vital for every service manager to learn?
Yeah. I mean, the thing that my degree didn't teach me at all was people, right? And this is a people business. You know, finance and accounting degrees don't talk about people and relationships and things of that nature. But that I found through my career is the most important part of your career is the people. We're in a people business. The car business is all about people. You want the best people around you. You want the most trustworthy people around you. And you want to nurture and develop those relationships because the people around you make or break you. They do on a daily basis. If you surround yourself with great people that you can trust and you nurture that relationship, you're going to achieve massive success. If you have people around you that are just kind of there and you don't pay attention to those people and you don't care about those people, then you're not gonna succeed. You will fail. Those people will leave you, they will break you, they will steal from you, they will do something of that nature. So I've learned throughout my career that by far the most important thing on a daily basis are the people. People matter. And it's what makes the job fun because if I can change somebody's life for the better, then I've achieved something that I never thought I would achieve, right?
Mhm.
Money comes and goes. We all know that. The world is really about people and pouring into people, building people, changing people's lives for the better.
Awesome. Yeah, we continue to see that and hear that on the show on a regular basis that those networks, those communities, those mentors, those relationships, those peers are the most important thing to get you through because it doesn't matter how well the business or the industry is doing, it will reflect how well you are doing depending on your circle, right? Your immediate circle, the circle slightly outside of that, the circle slightly outside of that. And the more people within those circles that are positive, that are uplifting, that are willing to give to you so that you rise and vice versa, the better that you are going to perform personally, professionally, however you see fit. And that it really is, we keep coming back to people over and over again, no matter how much we say. So to that point, to people that I love and trust and asking questions, I've got a couple of questions here for you. I mentioned to Pete before the show that there might be some questions to ask, and I've got a couple of questions. They're some of them are diverse. They're from various different group chats that I have, get TSL, 10 mil, and the Service Drive Live group chats, and as well as some that I found online. And I'm going to try and cherry pick a couple here because I don't want to take too many. So one of the challenges here that you probably deal with on a regular basis as somebody who manages several stores and looking at the financials and so on and so forth. Here's a question, and this is pointed. This is very pointed, ladies and gentlemen. Why aren't forecasts in the dealership world accurate?
That's a good question. That's a great question. Forecasts and budgeting in the dealership world is as good as the paper it's written on, right? I mean, I don't know anybody that I've ever worked with or worked for that has taken those forecasts and said, if you don't live up to those forecasts, that something drastic will happen. I've never seen that. And as a result, they kind of are a waste of time, to be honest with you. It's good to have them, obviously, because you want to know where you might go. But when you don't get there and you don't achieve them, I don't see a whole lot of accountability. I never have. So I think that part of that is why they're not as accurate as maybe they should be, because you don't get a lot of buy-in to the forecast process either. It's usually one person or two people driving the forecast. And when they don't hit the forecast, okay, we readjust the forecast.
Gotcha. So what you're telling me is perhaps not necessarily where you are, or quite honestly, there's obviously places that you've been that this has been in effect, as it were. But I don't want to tell service managers and fixed directors that the forecast isn't important. But I would say, after what you've said here, is that buy-in is as important to the forecast as the forecast itself. If the person doing the forecast, pushing the forecast, making it happen, is not getting buy-in from senior leadership, from middle leadership, like the service manager, the parts manager, or even the technicians and the salespeople. If there isn't buy-in that it's going to happen, that we can do this, we can move this train, we can move this mountain, we can be the unstoppable force to make this happen. If you don't have that buy-in, the forecast, as you said, to use your words, is as good as the papers it's written on. So I think what this comes down to, maybe as an aggregated whole, that to those who ask the question, improving your leadership, improving the store's leadership, ensuring that the influence that you have as a leader is deep rooted into all the things that the business cares about. I've talked about mission, vision, and values of dealerships at length on the show because it's incredibly important. The challenge that I see is stores that like to promote things like a forecast and talk about the forecast and talk about goals. There's a lot out there that don't even know what their mission, vision, and value is, let alone be able to communicate it to the team body, as it were. And when the team body doesn't know the basics, the mission, vision, values, how are they going to help you as a business leader, whether it's C-suite or ownership or dealer principal? How is the team going to help you accomplish your forecast if they can't even buy in on your mission, vision, values? So I think that succinctly brings that back to how well is leadership influencing the entire team and how they understand, because if they don't even have buy-in to the rest of the business, they're not going to have buy-in to the forecast. And I think
Yeah,
that's to your point.
that's exactly right. Because I've worked for dealership groups that they preach the forecast is the most important thing on the planet. 6 months of planning goes into the forecast, but there's only a handful of people involved. So when you go out and you try to talk to everybody else about it, they're like, we didn't have any buy-in on it. This is not our forecast. What do we have to do with this? Why do we care about
Hmm.
this? So that's a huge piece of it, I think, is getting the buy-in from the entire body and making it a real forecast that everybody knows and that everybody buys it into and that everybody's on the same page for. And it's not just some mandated number that's
Gotcha. So I'm going to ask another question here. So comp plans. This would be interesting. Comp plans throughout the store, are they typically structured the same way, or are they structured in such a way so that everybody can win, or is they structured so that it's just silos continue to occur? When it comes to comp plans of leadership, talking service managers, parts managers, fixed directors, service directors, and in your experience, is it tactically in your advantage at the C-suite to keep things in silos, or is it tactically advantageous to make it common across? And if it is tactically appropriate for common, why are we still doing silos?
It's a good question. Good question. So comp plans, I mean, there's a lot of schools of thought on comp plans, right? They are your job description, right? A comp plan is your job description. So work your comp plan, make the most money possible. When you're designing a comp plan from a dealership standpoint, you're saying, okay, I want, at least in my experience, this has always been my thought process is I want the employee to have a chance to win. And I want the dealership to have a chance to win at the same time. So if the dealership is winning, the employee's winning as well. That's driving that win for the dealership. So if it's a win-win situation, it's by far the best situation you can come up with for a comp plan. Are they uniform across the board? No, and I don't think they ever will be. I mean, you've got service, you've got body shop, you've got parts, you've got sales, you've got finance, you've got, accounting. So you have all these different departments that do so many different things. You can't have I don't think you can have a uniform comp plan across the board. You're going to have siloed comp plans. You're going to have a service comp plan. You're going to have a parts comp plan. You're going to have a F&I comp plan, a sales comp plan. You gotta have a new sales comp plan. You gotta have a used sales comp plan. You're gonna have a leasing comp. They're all, we just have different departments that function so differently. To pay everybody the exact same would be, I mean, I guess you could come up with something, whether you paid
Mhm.
everybody on the net income, paid everybody a percentage of the net income. But do they understand how their position drives that net income? That would be the challenge if you did something like that, right? The main
Mhm.
focus in a pay plan, I think, is to get the person to behave in a manner that you want them to behave. So they're winning for the store, which gives them a win for themselves. And that's really the goal in any comp plan. We want you to make, I want you to make as much money as you've ever made in your entire life. But that means the store's making more money than they've ever made before as well, you know? But if the store's losing, I sure as heck don't want to pay somebody a fortune to have the store lose. That makes no sense.
I agree. If the business doesn't win, the business doesn't stay around, which is not advantageous to the employee. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of technicians and service advisors don't necessarily understand. Those out there that are currently trying to, shall we say, for lack of a better term, demand a very high wage and don't understand how it's broken down and how it's actually paid and how money is made on the work order, specifically in the labor costs and so on and so forth in the work order. If you don't understand that, it's very difficult to ask for something you don't understand. For example, the comprehension that in most structures of money, how it goes through the work order, when you look at, for example, a $5 pay, if you're a technician out there thinking about, I make $50 a flat rate hour right now, I want to make 55. If you don't understand how much more money that the dealership needs to make in order to give you that $5 once, it's probably in your best interest to figure that out first so that you understand how real or unrealistic that number potentially is. And to the next point, door rate, throw that out the door. Door rate is like a figment of the imagination almost. ELR is a much better understanding to what you can or can't get paid in terms of percentage and so on and so forth. I've had discussions about this at nauseum with technicians about the difference between I should get paid 30% on the door rate. Well, that's a completely unrealistic number in 2026. So understanding that a little bit better. Understanding that a solid high value leader is going to structure your pay plan, whether it's flat rate or your part, get a base plus commission in service lane. They're, as Pete said, they're going to structure it so that they get the behaviors they want from you as an employee so that you win and have the opportunity to win, and so that the dealership has the opportunity to win at the same time. Those stores out there that are not structuring it so that it's a win-win, those aren't high value leaders. Those aren't high value stores.
Mm-mm.
And
You don't want to work
unfortunately,
there. Yep. You don't want to
there's
work there. There's
no,
plenty.
you don't want
There's
to work
lots of
out.
those. There are
Yeah.
lots of them. And I've seen it firsthand, where, okay, we don't want this guy to make too much money because if he makes too much money, he's going to get used to all that money and we're going to have to cut his pay plan. If the store's making money because of his actions, let's pay him,
Hmm.
pay him everything
Hmm.
he's earned, pay him everything he's due. Absolutely.
So I'd like to get into something a little bit more tactical for a brief period of time. The P&L. It's a big scary thing that isn't really big and scary. Can you give the service managers and shop foremen out there that have never seen a P&L before? Can you, for say 30 seconds, tell them something that they need to learn first the first time they read a P&L?
Yeah. So if you're looking at a dealer financial statement, which I assume you're alluding to,
Hmm.
you look at page 2, obviously, of every OEM statement is the income statement. So you've got revenue on there, which is sales, revenue equals sales. And you've got your litany of expenses, and then you've got your net income. So one thing that most people don't understand is all the expenses that go into running a dealership. One, you start with fixed expenses, right? There's rent, there's electricity, there's insurance, there's those fixed costs that exist no matter what you do, whether you decide to show up for work or not. All those costs have to get paid. Then you've got things like what kind of equipment am I using? What DMS am I using? There's DMS fees. There's all these third-party bolt-on apps that we all have that we have to pay for. There's more insurance that we have to pay for. And then there's all the people that we have to pay for as well. The personnel usually makes up the bulk of the expense on a P&L. So, I'd say the one big takeaway is that if you're looking to hire people, if you're looking to increase wages of any sort, of any kind, that's the biggest expense on the income statement. Always is, always has been. People walking around on 2 legs are the most costly things in a dealership. So think about that and make sure that that hire is going to be something that generates additional revenue. Otherwise, you're just costing more money to the dealership, right? It's always personnel. Personnel is always the most expensive piece and the piece you can't live without as well. So it has to be balanced. It has to be managed properly.
Is there a general multiplier, shall we say? Because I know that many fixed managers and service managers on a regular basis tell me as a vendor or talk to vendors and use this as a benchmark. Most of the time when they talk to vendors, they're looking for a 10x ROI on a piece of equipment or a software or something of that nature, where they're saying, it costs me 10,000 or it costs me $1,000 a month. It should at minimum make me 10,000 a month. Is there that same kind of concept that's kind of a benchmark per person in the dealership, irrespective of position? Is there a basic metric that
I
they
mean,
should know?
the most basic metric for personnel expense is a percentage of gross. So when I look at my personnel expense and I say, okay, benchmark back when I started in the business was around 35% of gross profit is what you wanted your total personnel expense to be. Now it's closer to 50. 50% of gross profit is where you want your personnel expense to lie. So that's really the best benchmark you can look at when you're looking at personnel. How much gross profit am I generating as a department, and how much is my personnel expense as a department? If I'm at 50% or less, I'm doing well. If I'm at 50 or greater than 50%, I've probably got a lot of personnel expense in my P&L.
Interesting. So that brings up let me follow that up with a little bit then. For those who go, okay, I've never heard that before. Now I have some kind of semblance to start thinking about that. I look at my financial statement that I have access to as a service manager, and I see that my department, my personnel cost is more than 50% of gross. What is something that they can do that isn't cut wages or cut bodies or cut hours that they can do to potentially help with that?
So the only other option is to grow revenue, grow gross, increase gross, sell, right? You nailed it earlier when you said service advisors are salespeople. Most, I would say a lot of, maybe not most, but a lot of fixed op directors, service managers don't agree with that. Service advisors are salespeople. Their job is to sell. Their job is not to take orders. So if you increase your hours per RO, which is a measurement of sales, you will grow your gross profit. If you grow your gross profit, you can overcome your expenses.
I like it. I like it. I think that's something that's too often overlooked. If you have an expense problem, sell more. And if you're not selling more, you need to teach the people who sell to sell better.
That's right.
Period.
You have one of two options. You can either cut or you can sell more. That's it. I mean, there's no other way around. It's math. It's 1 + 1 = 2.
It sounds like also from a my perspective as somebody who has difficulty selling things. I've always had difficulty selling. I've had difficulty, unfortunately, selling myself to that measure. But it sounds like cutting is kind of the easy answer because it's very easy to make up that overage of expense with, okay, I'm sorry, we have to let you go. And all of a sudden there's $4,000 a month freed up, right? Versus, okay, to make $4,000 more a month, we need to sell 100 more hours or whatever the number happens to be in terms of gross to make that happen. Selling more sounds harder than cutting people out, which is why more often than not, cutting or slashing wages is perhaps the answer because it's easy. Does that sound about right?
I don't know if it's easy, but it's definitely quantifiable, right? So I can say, okay, I'm going to sell more, but are you really going to sell more? How do we know you're going to sell more? How do we quantify the fact that you are actually going to sell more? What is your plan to sell more? You can say all day long, yeah, I'm going to sell my way out of this, but are you really? Cutting is quantifiable, right? If I know I'm going to cut ahead, I've got minus that expense coming out next month. So it's hard for people to let people go. I mean, that's not an easy thing. I mean, most people don't want to do that, you know? They want to protect their people. They don't want to create an environment where everybody thinks they're on the chopping block every minute. So that it's either one of them are hard. They're both hard. Neither one of them's easy.
I guess that to your point, if they're both hard, the only difference then becomes that the cutting is quantifiable and very, very, you can guarantee that expense has been reduced at the end of the month without question.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's so
Awesome.
for sure, if you get an edict that says, "Hey, I need you to be at X% by, 60 days from now," one way to guarantee that you'll achieve that is by cutting.
Mhm. Okay. That makes sense. And that also explains a lot of things for anybody out there that's a mechanic or service manager who is moving towards things like becoming a vendor or working for a vendor. This is why those sudden cuts at the end of the year potentially happen. You've got stores who potentially aren't necessarily managed as well as they could be or have as selly a service drive or as a capable as a service manager. It's a lot easier to make that number at the end of the year by cutting things out. So it's not necessarily easy, as Pete points out, but it's more quantifiable. So I like how that explains. That's a little bit better because there'll be folks out there that are going to learn a little bit from that because there's going to be service managers out there that are going to quantifiable, and there's service managers that's like, okay, let's put our head down. How do we, as to your point as well, Pete, how do we make a plan to make that extra 4 grand? What are we going to do to actually actionably make that happen? So I like that. I appreciate that. I think that's a good way to lead into the last question, Pete. And the last question, as always, is what's your one piece of advice for a technician to be happier, healthier, more productive tomorrow?
I have one piece of advice for a technician to be happier, healthier for
Or
tomorrow.
yeah,
So that's going to be on a personal level. I would say get your relationship with Jesus right more than anything. Focus on that. Focus on things that are important in life. A job is a means to an end. And at the end of the day, your faith and your family are the most important things in this world.
I agree. I've used the phrase family first for a very long time. And part of that myself getting back to a little bit more because I've even I keep it on the bench now because I struggle when I get out here more than I've ever struggled before 'cause the limbs and the joints and everything else don't work nearly as well as they used to, and I'm not nearly as good a shape as I'd like to be in. So when I come out here and I spend some time in the shop, it's like I used to do this for 12 hours a day and not blink. right? Working on my motorcycle or doing tires and swapping the winter tires over the summer tires on my wife's car. It's like I used to do this, 100 times a day and not even blink, and it's hard now. So, finding the things that make me happy and faith and family have really driven that down the road a whole lot more especially in the last year. But it's been coming for the last 4. So I appreciate that. Pete, I really appreciate you taking the time this evening and today and giving a few insights. I like the little tidbits in there, the quantifiable stuff, the actual intel on end of the month. I really appreciate that very, 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 very much.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. So it was great talking to you.
Most welcome. So I think we're going to cap her off there today. And I've got a quote to end the show, as I always do. Short, very short, but very impactful nonetheless. One faces the future with one's past. And that's Pearl S. Buck. Folks, I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you share, like, and subscribe to the show. And as always, negative pushes, positive pulls, and always clean your toys before you put them away.